Today we're going to be making kombucha with some classic Halloween candy flavors. Not necessarily because I think it's going to taste good, but because I think we're going to learn a lot in the process. And today we're going to start with what I think might be the easiest option, the caramel apple. When I think of caramel apple, I think specifically of the crisp, tart Granny Smith apple, paired equally with the silky, fatty, sweet caramel, which presents our first problem of the day. Because with the high temperatures of fermentation and the low pH, any fat that we have has a chance of going rancid. So to avoid that, we're going to try two different things. First, we're going to use not a non-fat, but a low-fat caramel sauce that's pre-made. And then to try and save ourselves $6 in the future, we're going to be making a caramelized simple syrup ourselves. Secondly, we're going to be making the classic candy corn. The flavor on the package is apparently honey, marshmallow fondant, and butter. When I look at the actual ingredients, though, it appears to be variations of corn syrup. So we're first going to be trying to mimic these flavors ourselves with the natural ingredients, and then we're going to just melt these things down and stick it in the bottle and see what happens. Finally, we've got milk chocolate malted Whoppers, which presents the same problems we had with the caramel. The milk chocolate can't have fat, and the malted milk can't have fat. So we're going to try two different syrups to try and get around that. So let's get started. The first thing we should talk about, though, is sugar. If you look at most traditional kombucha recipes for homebrew, it's going to use a lot less sugar than they would in the major brands. And sugar is what's the difference between having just a sweet kombucha to having a kombucha that tastes specifically like a Granny Smith apple. So we're going to be using quite a bit. So that was 3 Granny Smith apples, and that gave us about 175 milliliters of pure juice. But because we want to be very certain about how much sugar is going into our kombucha bottle, we're going to test this apple juice to see just how sweet it is. And to do that, we're just going to use a refractometer. This is at 12.4% sugar. And it tastes like it. For our caramel simple syrup, I'm just going to add a half cup of sugar and a 1/4 cup of water. I'm going to heat that on medium-high for 5 minutes. Once that's done, I'm going to cover it and boil it for 3 minutes. Then we're going to remove the lid, stir it until it darkens a bit. Then we take it off the heat, add a 1/4 cup of water, and then a ½ teaspoon of vanilla. For our candy corn simple syrup, we're just going to add a ½ cup of candy corn and a ½ cup of water. Simmer it for just a few minutes, stirring constantly until all of the waxy little bits dissolve. For the chocolate syrup, we're going to combine a 1/4 cup of cocoa, a 1/4 cup of water, a ½ cup of sugar, and 3/4 teaspoon of vanilla. We just need to heat this on medium until it dissolves. For our chocolate malt syrup, we're going to use a ½ cup of sugar, a ½ cup of water, 1 tablespoon of malt powder, in this case I used Ovaltine, 1 tablespoon of cocoa, then a ½ teaspoon of vanilla, and a pinch of salt. Now, for the tea for kombucha, I like to use the strongest flavor tea I can without masking the flavor of my ingredients. And the level of flavor is usually black tea, oolong, green, and then white. And while I think a caramel apple could probably stand up to a black tea, I think the candy corn might not have the legs. So today we went with a half black, half oolong brew. And this we're just going to set aside to start our next batch. One other note about sugar is for most commercial brands, if you get something like an apple flavored kombucha, for a bottle like this, you're looking at about 15 grams of sugar. Since we're making candy kombucha though, I'm going to aim for something more like 20 grams of sugar. Something that I'm hoping is sweet, but still palatable. And when I measure with grams because I feel like it's a little bit easier to adjust up and down by couple of grams as opposed to ounces. For our first bottle, we're going to use our homemade caramel simple syrup, which has frozen into, I guess not as solid of a block as I thought, but still quite a thick sludge. This came out to be 90% sugar. So to this, I'm going to add 11 grams, or about 1 teaspoon if you're following along at home. Tastes like vanilla and sugar. For our Granny Smith apple juice, we're going to add 80 grams. But because this caramel sauce is just caramelized sugar and water, and a little bit of vanilla. It's still missing a little bit of that unctuous fat that I'm hoping for. And I'm hoping that some butter extract will make up the difference. It won't provide that mouthfeel, but perhaps the smell of it alone will make you think that it's richer than it is. And I'm going to add an entire gram of this. It smells like movie theater popcorn. I don't know if this is a good idea, but now I feel committed. Perhaps something not to be overdone. And we'll set this aside. For a second caramel apple, we're also going to add another 80 grams of the Granny Smith apple juice. And this time we're going to use the Ghirardelli caramel sauce, which is 40% sugar. So we're going to add 24 grams. That tastes better. That tastes better than mine. But we'll see how that butter extract works though. And that's it for bottle number 2. For our first candy corn bottle, this one's going to be a little bit of a Frankenstein. I think the flavor of honey should be first and foremost, because the flavor of corn syrup, I'm not sure if that's distinctive enough to be an interesting candy corn kombucha. This honey is 81% sugar, and we're going to add 18 grams. And since it's going to be a short fermentation, whether or not it's pasteurized shouldn't matter. We do want a bit of that corn sweetness, so we're going to add 15 grams of corn syrup. To that, we're going to add 1 gram of vanilla extract to mimic that marshmallow fondant flavor, and then 1/8 of a teaspoon of our butter extract. More than I hoped. I think the smell of it gets a lot better when it's mixed with sugar. Not yet a believable candy corn. Our melted candy corn syrup came out to 68.4% sugar. And I was a little worried it would return back to its waxy form once it cooled, but it seems to have held up quite nicely. We're going to add 29 grams of this. And as someone who actually does like candy corn, this syrup is disgusting. It has none of the, dare I say, subtle flavors of actual candy corn. There's no vanilla, there's no honey, there's no delightful waxy chew. It's just straight sugar. Our chocolate syrup definitely turned out the best of all the different ones we tried here today. It is 76% sugar, and I wanted a good balance of the chocolate to malt, so we're going to add 21 grams. Now to get our malt flavor, I went with Ovaltine, which has a classic malt taste, it says. I've never had this myself, but I also didn't realize that the primary ingredient is sugar. We're going to add 22 grams and see if we can get it down this funnel. And then for a bit of balance, we're going to add a pinch of salt. That's mostly powder, so we'll see how that turns out. For our final brew, we are just going to use the chocolate salted malt sauce we made before, which turned out to be 65.6% sugar. And we're going to be using 30 grams of it. And compared to the chocolate sauce, there is a lot more depth of flavor because you do already have the malt in there, you've got the salt. It's just also a painful punch of pure sugar that makes it very difficult to eat. And now there's nothing else to do but to top it off with our kombucha. Now I'm just going to let them sit for 3 days at 74 degrees. And I should also note that even though making kombucha is simple, I am doing it in the most complicated way possible. So we'll see how these taste in 3 days. After 3 days of fermentation and another night in the refrigerator, we are finally ready to test this. And as someone who has cleaned strawberry puree off the ceiling, we're going to be a little bit careful about this. Not too bad. For exactly this reason. It's at least carbonated. Starting off, we have our caramel apple. And this is the one made with our homemade caramel simple syrup and a little bit of butter extract. There's a lot of grit inside of it. I'm hoping it's from the apple. It mostly smells and tastes like Granny Smith apple. It's sweet. I get none of that popcorn butter taste. It's almost entirely just Granny Smith apple. Let's try the other one. This is the one made with our Ghirardelli caramel sauce, and it looks noticeably thicker. It smells off. It smells bad. There is a sort of sour gym sock funk. It smells exactly like a dirty, like an old dish rag. We're gonna say homemade one wins. Just tastes like apple juice. Moving on, we've got our candy corn. I'm hoping that it tastes like candy corn taste in my mind, if that makes sense. Because the actual thing, it's so gross. It's just the cheapest vanilla and corn syrup. So first up, we have our homemade recreation, which, if you'll recall, has primarily honey inside of it, along with vanilla butter extract and some corn syrup. Smells like apple cider. Oh my God, that actually is, that is weirdly like candy corn. It doesn't smell like candy corn. It smells like apple juice, apple cider. And drinking it, it tastes like apple juice. But when you breathe out, it has all the notes that I would expect candy corn to have. You got a mouthful of the SCOBY. Yeah, apple juice going down, candy corn coming back out. But is it more candy corn than the actual product? Noticeably orangier, more carbonation for sure. It's got a very like yeasty dreg sort of smell. Sorry, the SCOBY is clear and it keeps slipping into my mouth when I least expect it. And it's really gross. It doesn't taste like candy corn. It tastes like cheap homemade wine, which I say from experience. It's not bad. It is carbonated. It is sweet. It does have some of the tea flavor carrying through. Yeah, there's nothing candy corn about this. I think once again, I'm going to have to go with the recreation rather than the melted thing. Got so much of that candy corn slime stuck to my tongue. Finishing things off here, we have our chocolate malted Whopper. And we're going to start with our chocolate sauce, malt powder, and salt version. Ooh, it smells like chocolate sauce. All right, pretty good carbonation, quite a bit of foam on top. It smells like chocolate, smells like a Yoo-hoo. No, it smells exactly like a Tootsie Roll. Do I want to drink a fermented tea Tootsie Roll? There's the kind of like mild, watery, cheap chocolate taste, and then it swings straight into sour. I don't know what else I was expecting though. If this was Tootsie Roll kombucha, I would have 100% nailed it. And they're so clearly separated. It's straight Tootsie Roll and then straight punch of sour. And I'm definitely going to pour that away. Finally, we've got our malted chocolate sauce. Noticeably much lighter. This looks like just regular kombucha. If I was going for purely visuals, I feel like this would win. There is a little bit of maltiness, but it mostly just kind of tastes like plain kombucha. It's got that mild apple cider taste. It's a little sweeter than I would like, since they're all 20 grams of sugar per bottle, but there's just kind of a little bit of malt on the exhale, but it's drinkable. It's certainly not better than plain kombucha though. I am picking up the maltiness now in this too, so if I think about it, I could see this as a Whopper. If we're only thinking about does it taste like the candy, I think this one's the clear winner. But if we're talking about is it good and something I would want to drink, I think I'd go with the one that tastes just kind of like plain kombucha. Which, to reiterate, is not better than plain kombucha. But hopefully we learned a little bit along the way about replicating flavors. I am pretty surprised that just melting the thing down and using that directly in the bottle didn't turn out better. In every case, it was worse by a lot. I do think this showed how versatile that kombucha can be. I would like to think these are some pretty diverse flavors. I think we were able to get pretty close to what we were looking for, even if these are things that no one would ever make again. So happy Halloween, and we'll see you next time on Reckless Booch. Yeah, that's okay.